Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very special edition of the Squared Circle News. My name is Vinnie, and I am here. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of intro right now. I had a great interview with somebody who has kind of a cult following. Um, I've mentioned that he's going to be a presenter at the Sudsy Awards for newcomer slash return of the year in WWE. And I believe that he's a great guy. Just talking to him, he just put out a book. I found out he put out a comic book previously, and he's working on a second book. Uh, if you listen to Jim Cornette's Drive Through, you know him as Charlie from Starkville, Mississippi. His name is Charlie Dimino, and we'll be talking about a lot of stuff. However, I did want to come out here first. You're going to hear it later on in the episode that I am doing a giveaway for the Sudsy Awards. Here's the deal. I want you to like this video or podcast, whichever way that you are consuming it. I want you to like it. I want you to subscribe to our YouTube page or the podcast feed, whichever way you're listening or consuming this. Are you watching on YouTube or are you listening to it on a podcast? I want you to like, subscribe, and get notified. But I want you to screenshot the fact that you subscribe to the YouTube page, and I want you to email it to Vinnie, Vinnie, at sudsandsquaredcircle.com to enter yourself into a drawing to receive a free copy of Charlie's book, What Happened to Our Wrestling. Charlie from Starkville asks the fans, and the that'll go until the Sudsy Awards, until the Sudsy voting is done. So up until July 7th. And then on the day of the Sudsy Awards, which is Sunday, July 21st, I will announce the winner and I will send them their copy and get in touch with them and send them their copy of the book, What Happened to Our Wrestling. So that is it. I want you to like this podcast, whether it's video or podcast. If you want to do both, if you want to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube, you get two entries. So I'll make it even better for you. So if you like this podcast and like the video and subscribe to the podcast feed and subscribe to the video, email me the screenshots. Vinnie, Vinnie, at sudsandsquaredcircle.com to enter yourself into the drawing for the free copy of What Happened to Our Wrestling. Charlie from Starkville asks the fans. And on Sunday, July 21st, when the Sudsy Awards are released, the winner will be announced. And I'll get in touch with you and I will get you your book. All right. So go ahead and continue listening and enjoy the conversation I had with Charlie from Starkville, Mississippi. You may know him as Charlie from Starkville, Mississippi. This is Charlie Dimino. I hope I got your last name right. And Charlie, how are you today?
Doing good, and that's perfect. It's Domino. So most
Oh,
people come from a place like New York or New Jersey. No, born and raised in Mississippi.
well, very good. It's good to have you, Charlie. And I do want to let everybody know as well. I have mentioned it numerous times on both Twix and Facebook. Charlie is going to be one of the presenters at this year's Sudsy Awards coming up in July, and uh, he's going to be putting out or presenting the Sudsy Award for. Hang on, I have so many that I have to find it. Um, I think, yeah, I have you going ahead and presenting the return newcomer of the year for wrestling. Well, actually, it should just say WWE because that's all that I include because I don't pay attention to AEW.
Mhm.
Uh, but, anyways, Charlie, you put out a book not too long ago, and I want to recognize that called "What Happened to Our Wrestling." Charlie from Starkville asks the fans. It's a great read, and it's actually set up like you're interviewing other wrestling fans. So, what gave you the idea to come up with it?
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm looking forward to being a presenter, by the way. That should be fun. But
Yes.
again for me being here. And basically, a little bit of my background. I grew up
Sure.
Memphis territory in the 80s.
Okay.
So Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler, right? That was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life when I was a kid.
Hmm.
So I grew up, and then my love for it started to wane. And I saw a lot of people out there that had the same kind of mindset and look like I had. So I just wanted to interview these people and just see why that changed for them.
Okay. I definitely understand that. And being somebody that grew up with the Memphis territory, um, how has, you know, obviously wrestling has changed a lot. How, in your opinion, how has your fandom of wrestling changed with the evolution of the business?
Well, when I was a kid, it was a lot more realistic, especially down here.
Yeah.
Now you look at it, and you can even look at the kids in the crowd, right? And you will see them
Hmm.
playing with their phones.
Yeah.
It's changed tremendously where people had a very big investment in it. And it turned into something that they go to once a year. They take their kids, and sometimes their kids don't even look interested to be there.
Right.
That changed a lot for me.
Yeah. No, I understand. Believe me, I'm such a huge wrestling fan myself, and I took my son to a couple of Monday Night Raws, also a couple of indie shows, and he's not into it.
Well, like I said, it's more entertaining for a kid nowadays to play on his phone because he can
Yep.
somebody fall X amount of times and do all these moves, and they keep getting back up, and they look like it didn't bother them at all.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Now,
And what? Go on.
now is that realistic to a younger kid when they see that and it's like a video game they're playing where it's a game, nobody gets hurt? Okay, well, what they're looking at in the ring, it's kind of like the same game, except
Yeah,
except people are really getting hurt a lot more
you're
than
right.
they used to.
No, you're absolutely right. And I was going to bring that up in that I'm glad you did because uh, I think that video games have had a lot of influence over wrestling now, whether it's you look at like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or even the wrestling video games themselves. Um, it seems like instead of the video game kind of emulating what goes on in the ring, it's more about the real live wrestlers emulating what they see on the video games.
Yes, and I've been asked this a couple of times by a couple of different other people that have interviewed me.
Right.
Said, Charlie, what was a high point in wrestling for you? And I had to explain this to them, and you'll understand this. I was
Hmm.
at the birth of Suplex City and Staples Center when I lived out in Los Angeles, right?
Yep.
There were children sitting next to me when John Cena got beat up by Brock Lesnar that were crying.
Wow. Okay.
Now, I'm not a fan of children crying, but that raw emotion from those kids is
Yep.
something that I don't think you can get back today.
No, I think I agree with you. Um, because it felt that way back in the 80s, that raw emotion.
Hmm.
Like you said, it was more real back then, right?
Well,
Um,
that was the
Go ahead.
that was a high point for me because
Hmm.
I was an adult. I was an adult in my early 30s, and I was looking at kids have the same raw emotion as I had.
Right.
Now, I'm in my early 40s. It's been 10 years later, and that just seems to be gone.
Yeah, I agree with you because I've seen it myself. There, what do you contribute that to? Is it because of we know so much about the business now because of social media, or do you think it just boils down to people have changed?
Well, the kids don't because you have a younger kid, they're coming in with a fresh set of eyes.
True.
What they do know is the way these guys react in the ring. So if they're shrugging it off, if they can do 15 different things and shake their head and say, no, it doesn't hurt me,
Hmm.
well, what are the kids going to think? Can these guys be hurt?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look at so what do you feel is um something that has contributed to that?
Well, I think the fact that you have a lot of these wrestlers that look younger, that can relate to children, that are telling them it's basically a joke. And
Yep,
they're going out on national television telling these younger kids that what we do is something you should laugh at.
I can understand that. Absolutely. I could see that. Um so let's try to switch gears a little bit because I mean it all ties together. Do you think that we as fans know too much, or even with the the Dave Meltzers of the world or the PW insiders, do you think that we know too much about the wrestling industry, especially when it comes to people who are leaving? We never knew back then whose contract expired or who was, who came over to whether it was WWF or NWA or World Class or Memphis. We didn't know who came into the territory until they actually got there. Do you think we know too much about the behind the scenes stuff now?
Well, it's the people behind the scenes really know what's going on. People
Yep.
people can talk about it. Dave Meltzer is a perfect example. He can talk about it all the time, and Dave has a lot of connections. But when
Hmm.
something that Dave says doesn't happen, all he says is the plans changed.
Yeah.
So really, the only people that, especially in WWE, that's going on for sure, and what the plan is, are the people running that company.
That's true.
You can talk about leaks and stuff like that, but a lot of it is a bunch of rumors and just guesses.
Yes.
So nobody knows what's really going on with a company like WWE except for the people in WWE that are calling shots. AEW is a completely different story, right?
Hmm.
AEW has leaks all the time of what's going on behind their scenes. To me, that more reflects on management.
Yep. Do you think that it's Tony Khan himself that because he has such a connection with Dave Meltzer that he's the one just, oh, I don't care. I'll just put all this information out myself.
Well, they definitely have a very good relationship, and they definitely come from a different background, like somebody like Paul Levesque. Paul Levesque was
Hmm.
trained by Killer Kowalski, so there's certain things that are sacred to him.
Yes.
With Tony Khan, it's a different story. He looks at everything as he can get it out to Dave Meltzer if he needs to, and there's only a small base of the market though that is paying attention to this 24/7.
Yes.
I mean, AEW's ratings right now, what are they, around 400 to 450,000?
Um, about that in terms of definitely for Collision, I think Dynamite gets a little bit more closer to six or seven, 600 or 700,000 a week. But I agree, it's a very small niche audience.
It hasn't grown since the company started.
No, it's deteriorated.
Yeah, if anything, it's got worse. And that's the thing about it. They had a very good shot when they started, where their numbers were, up to a respectable degree for,
Hmm.
a company that was starting out. Then they brought in CM Punk, and they got, up to over 1 million people watching the show for a short time.
Right.
But after, like you said, people know too much. They know what happened with that whole story, and I don't need to repeat it. But it,
Yep.
it, it makes the company look bad. It makes everybody involved look bad. And it turns off the casual fan because that's not something they want to see.
Right. Do you think that even and we see it in both WWE and AEW? Do you think that the wrestlers themselves, when they're in the ring on TV, whether it's cable or network, in front of a lot of audience, do you think they do a little bit too much, as they say, inside baseball references?
Well, WWE does a good job of, you know, not letting that be something that somebody's going to beat somebody over the head with.
Right.
AEW is, it's like night and day. AEW, right? They will beat you over the head with these insider references that the casual fan doesn't know, and if even if they don't know, they don't care.
Yeah. And I think we saw that with um, Hangman Page. That started the whole problem with CM Punk when Hangman Page went into, as they say, business for himself and brought up about Punk and Colt Cabana, and that just started the snowball effect that ended up leading to Brawl In, no Brawl Out, the original time with the Bucks and Omega going into Punk's locker room.
Well, the thing about that is the casual fan doesn't care about, because let's be honest, Colt Cabana, he's a niche wrestler, so the average fan doesn't
Yep.
even know who he is.
Hmm.
So when they're watching this TV show and Adam Page is somebody new to them, they know
Yep.
who CM Punk is. But when he starts bringing up this wrestler that they don't know, and even if they do know, they really don't care about, it completely takes away from everything they're trying to do in that ring to sell,
Yeah.
to sell the match.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. All right. So you mentioned about your high point in wrestling.
Hmm?
What were some of the low points in wrestling for you in your fandom?
Well, we talked about some of these guys getting too cute and stuff like this, and I went over this in a couple of podcasts that I've been on. One of the things that really got under my skin is Nick Jackson. He was wrestling on Dynamite, and he rolled out of the ring and said, "Best comeback in history." Well,
Wow.
that's something that he just doesn't need to do ever.
Right.
He thinks it's cute and he thinks it's funny, but it's not. And nobody really cares if he's doing it.
Yeah.
For what reason was he doing that? That's
Yeah.
that's just one example of some of the stuff I've seen some of these guys do, where I look at it and I just ask myself, are they trying to do this to make themselves and their little group laugh?
Yeah.
Are they trying to sell tickets to anybody?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the even not only the TV numbers, but the attendance numbers for AEW dwindle as well.
I will tell you this. I went to a house show when they were running that house show tour in Tupelo.
Hmm.
It's the Cadence Bank Center now, but it was the Tupelo Coliseum when I was a kid, right?
Yep.
10,000 seats. They sold 1,500 tickets.
Wow.
There might have been there might have been 1,100 people there.
Wow.
It was empty, empty, empty. And this was a house show. It wasn't a TV.
Yep.
It wasn't a TV recording. So if they would have actually tried to do a dynamite or something there, that's probably the same number of people they would have gotten in a 10,000 seat building.
Yeah. That's insane. But all right. Well, while we're let's switch from the modern stuff, right? We've talked about a lot of AEW, a lot of WWE. Um, but let's kind of go back in time. You mentioned that you grew up in the Memphis territory. You went to, that's what shaped your wrestling fandom. Um, how did you get into wrestling? What's your first memories as a wrestling fan?
My dad, we had a black and white TV with 3 channels, and that's one of the things you could watch on it.
Wow.
And
I
then
love that.
then we eventually got cable, and then we had NWA and WWF. Now, as,
Hmm.
now as a kid, WWF, that I'll put it to you this way. NWA looked like a bunch of guys that came out of a bar that would beat each other up.
Yes.
They looked like real men you would be seeing walking around in Mississippi. WWE looked like a cartoon on TV.
Yep.
Now, that was okay when you were a kid watching Hulk Hogan Hulk up, but you wanted to watch the NWA because they they were like real people you would see. You never saw anything like Hulk Hogan walking down the street here. You saw a couple of Bobby Eatons. You saw
Yep.
you saw a couple of guys that looked like Arn Anderson, a couple of guys that were pretty close, right?
Hmm.
That was more realistic to me, and it was believable because to us, when we were kids here, my little group of friends, we had the real wrestling, which was NWA, and then we had, we didn't call it the phony wrestling, but you know, the stuff you would see as cartoons on TV, you know.
Right.
But NWA was the real wrestling, and I always gravitated towards that because that was some of the first stuff I saw with Lawler and Dundee when I was a child.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still gravitate towards it.
And that's fantastic. So do you find yourself watching more of the older stuff, whether it be on YouTube or Peacock or anywhere that you're able to find it compared to the newer stuff?
Yeah, I can go and watch YouTube videos and really still enjoy them. I mean,
Yep.
a good example of that is the Road Warriors, right? I'm going to tell you right now, when I was a kid, they were great. As an
Yeah.
adult, they're still great. They're a
Yeah.
generational tag team that still translates to today. Now I look at it and what are people going to think of Matt and Nick Jackson 10 years from now?
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. You look at it, you look at teams, and you can go through the teams, whether it's the Road Warriors or Arn Anderson and Oldie Anderson, or Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. Any of those NWA tag teams, or even Demolition in the WWF. Again, that's more cartoony, and they were probably a ripoff of the Road Warriors. Uh, but you look at a lot of those tag teams, but then you look at the tag teams of today. What tag teams you have today that'll really be remembered? It's almost like tag teams today are more of a means to an end. See which one gets over, we break them up, and that's going to be the single star, and the other one fades into obscurity.
Well, I'll never forget this. When I was a kid, you would get a comic book and you would open it up and there'd be an ad in the back of it with the Road Warriors in there.
Okay.
The Road
Wow.
the Road Warriors were a main event.
Hmm.
I can't think of a lot of guys right now that are together that can be in that position.
Right.
So
No, you're right.
tag team wrestling used to be a different thing in the 80s.
Yes, exactly. Um, all right. I had another question going further. So, okay, so let's kind of move into it as to why did you write your book? Like, what was the impetus for getting, or even before why you wrote it, but how did you gather these stories? Like, who were these people you know, that you interviewed for the book? Because it's set up where you're interviewing, fans of wrestling yesteryear, from the golden era, as they say.
Well,
Where'd you find everybody?
basically, here's what happened. I wrote my first comic book, right? And I
Yep.
wanted to start up a Facebook page so I could promote my comic book and just, talk to people on there because at that point I'd been writing questions for Jim and Brian for a couple of years, and
Hmm.
people wanted to, especially after my comic book came out, they wanted to get to know who I was. So
Yep.
I just started interacting with them because I'll talk to anybody that wants to have a good conversation about wrestling.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people very disgruntled about everything that was going on and something that they loved as a child turning into what it is now.
Yes.
So I thought up the idea of just saying, look, I want to give you guys your say.
Hmm.
And if anybody, has a different opinion of it, I want to hear your opinion too. There are some people in the book that are saying, they're not disgruntled with it. They don't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of wrestling it's going to evolve into. They're still going to love it because it's wrestling.
Right.
That's a very positive attitude to have. The majority of the people in the book don't. Uh, they look at it this way: they want their wrestling back, and if they can't get it back, they're going to be mad.
Yeah. That's great because it brings the voices of the people out. We hear all the time, you know, the any kind of entertainment. Suds and Square Circle, which is, my podcast network, I go with both wrestling and soap operas. And it's the same thing. The genres are so similar because for a long time, wrestling was called the soap opera for men. And the genres have changed, whether it's because of the audience's tastes, or just entertainment in general. And there are many people disgruntled with the current crop of wrestling and the current crop of soap operas. Um,
That's a good way to put it. And you can juxtapose both of them because they are telling the same kind of stories.
yes,
But it's the same thing even with TV. You know, people will still want the TV they had when they wanted shows like Cheers and Seinfeld on. They want that back.
yes, yep,
They're not going to get it back, and it's not going to happen again. It's the
hmm,
same thing with wrestling. I don't know if wrestling is going to move back towards what it was when I was younger because there's a chance that could happen, but
hmm,
it most likely won't. And who's to say, you know, when the Young Bucks retire, where people are going to, that grew up watching them, are going to say that's the greatest wrestling they ever saw, and they want that to come back.
yeah. I mean, it does. It turns into something that you look at relatively, right? Because we're from one generation, and you go to a younger generation, and they like the flip flop and fly or the flippity, trampoline cowboys, um, as opposed to the older stuff. And again, you're right. We had growing up, being that we're in basically the same generation, we had two completely different types of wrestling. We had the NWA, which is more, if you want to say, sports based presentation, more reality driven in terms of you can actually look at anybody from the NWA and say, oh, these are guys you would meet in the bar, and I don't want to screw with them. If when it came to the WWF, it was more cartoony. You had the over the top characters, Hulk Hogan, the $1 Million Man. Even when Dusty came up to the WWF, the American Dream character himself. I mean, you you had the two distinct types of wrestling. Now it seems like a lot of the wrestling, and you can say whether or not it just had to do with WCW Nitro and introducing the cruiserweights to a mainstream audience, and a lot of young guys watched that style and want to emulate that style. So it does. It's generationally where whatever generation you grew up with is what you enjoy, and then yeah, you're going to evolve with it.
Well, you're right about that. And you brought up WCW, and that's a good point to me because you go back and look at those cruiserweight matches, they were slower. They weren't, moving like snails, but they were
Right.
slower. Their matches were more methodical, and their matches were more logical than what's going on right now.
Yep. And the one thing that we the one thing that we enjoyed growing up was the storytelling. A lot of that is missing nowadays.
Well, there is somewhat storytelling in AEW, but it seems to tail off. It seems to have holes in it.
Hmm.
When you're watching WWE, it's at least it's succinct and you can follow it.
Right.
I've seen some stuff on AEW. They'll do it one week, and then you'll turn it back on the next week, and they'll never mention it again until 3 weeks later, and they just bring it right back up. And it's like, well, what happened this last month where it just disappeared and it just came back and then it disappears again?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of times where I watch that, and for a casual fan, that's very hard to follow.
Yes, you're right.
They want to see the same story every week with, the same, at least, core group of people. They want
Yep.
to see that. And, when people show up out of nowhere, especially when Tony Khan does this, when he brings guys from Japan and stuff, the American audience don't know who these people are. The majority of them
Right.
don't. So it's very confusing for them to hear Excalibur talk about something that happened in New Japan when a lot of the American audience, some of them at least know what New Japan is, but don't really watch it. And a lot
Hmm.
of them don't know what New Japan is at all.
Yeah. And again, and now he's doing stuff with CMLL in Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. All right. So let's uh let's actually kind of talk about how you got your following as Charlie from Starkville, Mississippi. I know the first time I heard that name was on the Jim Cornette drive-through. So how what caused you to start writing questions to Jim and Brian? Was it just a whim? Was it just it took off like you didn't expect, or?
I was just a big fan of the show. I lived in
Mhm.
California for 11 years, and
Okay.
I moved back to Mississippi, and I took over my parents' storage unit business because they had gotten up into their 60s at that point, and they needed, somebody to, because they were, looking at selling the business, so they needed somebody to take over. And I said, well, I'll come back and take over. So I came back, took over the business, and when you're sitting in an office in storage units, it
Hmm.
get boring. So I
Yep.
I would listen to Jim's podcast, and they were doing the drive-through, and I said, well, I'm going to just start writing questions. So
Hmm.
I just started doing it. They just started showing up on the air. They said they really enjoyed it, do more of it, and
Hmm.
I treated it like a job, right? And I just
Yep.
went from there, and it just turned into a thing where they wanted me on there more and more.
Yeah. And it's great because the interplay between Jim and Brian, and Jim constantly just accusing Brian that his pen name was Charlie from Starkville. You had to get a kick out of that, just knowing that you're providing such great content for Jim and Brian on their podcast. Because like no matter what you think about Jim Cornette, he's a very polarizing character. But even when you're listening to him, he has a great mind for wrestling.
One of the greatest in the history of wrestling in my generation and his, and that I've seen.
Yeah.
I have the utmost respect for Jim and Brian because there would be no Charlie from Starful. I wouldn't be able to do my comics. I wouldn't be able to do my wrestling books. I wouldn't be able to do any of this if they wouldn't give me the opportunity to do it. And I have to thank them all the time for just giving me the opportunity to do that. And little insider secret here, I did give Brian a pre-screener of my book, which only 5
Mhm.
exists. And so I kind of paid him off with that one. So Jim, Jim is right about that.
Yeah, that was a big thing too about if you were paying him off that way. So now we know the truth. I get it.
Yeah.
Um, and I appreciate the exclusive. Um, but no, in all honesty, because I remember you when we first talked, and I first asked if you would be a presenter for the Sudsy Awards coming up, and you asked why me,
Yeah. I'm
and
like, why do you want me? That's the craziest thing about all of this. I have 3 different T-shirts that I sell.
Mhm.
I've got a fourth one that I'm developing that I sell T-shirts. I've got a graphic novel. I've got this first wrestling book, and I've got my follow up book that I'm wrapping right now.
Hmm.
So I people every time people buy something that I produce, I'm so thankful in the first place. And the second question is why?
No, and I get it. And you know what? You know what it is for me is that I've been a lifelong wrestling fan myself, and I've tried myself to, you know, whether it's public access TV, because I've started doing this way back in '97,
Yeah.
with public access TV. And you get a little bit of a following, but this was pre-internet days, so there was no YouTube. So it's like you only really knew and you only really got ratings, so to speak, and it wasn't even that much, but from your local cable station. Um, with the advent of YouTube, it's like you could reach everybody. What my thing is that I saw it as you're a fan.
Yeah.
You're a fan like me, and it just so happens that you hit the lottery. Like you're talked about on one of the best wrestling podcasts, and it's just you're a humble guy yourself, so it's not like you're a manager that turned into a gimmick or whatever. It's just you're a fan, and I love that. I love that you and I can talk about wrestling, whether it's the old stuff, the new stuff, what's changed, or what have you. And you, you're not somebody who's uh, gonna be an asshole about it, for lack of a better term.
Well, here's the thing about it. I wish things were different from what they are right now. And there's still
Hmm.
some good stuff out there that I enjoy. But at
Yep.
the same time, I'm never going to get that feeling back that I got in my youth. That's okay.
Right.
I can still love it. I can still appreciate it. And it's still a big part of my life to this day. I wouldn't be who I am without seeing it as a child. So
Yes.
I don't understand a lot of people that, you know, I've got a love hate relationship with it, but nowadays everybody has a hate.
Yes. And I don't even think it's a hate. I think you get a lot of people who just want that. They just want to hear, see their name on Twix or on social media, and they want to troll about it.
Yeah. Uh, my door is always open to anybody that wants to have a good conversation with me. But,
Yeah.
I've had people say, well, you're an AEW hater. No, there was some stuff that I liked about AEW,
Hmm.
but they seem to go away from that.
Yeah.
If I dislike something, I'll point it out.
Hmm.
I've been accused of being a WWE fanboy. I really, there's stuff I like about it, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm not a big fan of. You can like something about something and dislike it and still watch it.
Yes.
You don't have to be black and white about it.
You're exactly right, and I think that's where it comes to, is because there's good with any form of entertainment. You're going to have stuff that people hate. You're going to have stuff that people love, and the stuff that people love, others are going to hate. I could tell you that I'm not a huge fan of AEW because of in what I see, and I tried watching it. I was happy there was a competitor to the WWE. I wanted to recreate the Monday Night Wars with two good wrestling companies. It just, in my opinion, hasn't happened. Is it because Tony Khan doesn't have the management or leadership skills that somebody like Vince McMahon or Triple H has? I don't know. I mean, it could be. Is it because Tony Khan spreads himself too thin and doesn't delegate to the wrestling people to be bookers, and he wants to act out his fantasy wrestling? Possibly. Um, but that's something that we as fans we don't really know, except for what we hear on podcasts or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was doing a podcast with a good friend of mine. He has his podcast in Oslo, and he asked
Hmm.
a similar question. And I told him, I said, Tony Khan has one of the best rosters. He's got some great.
Yes.
He has some great people on it. And I asked the question to him. I said, "What is he doing with them?" And he said, "Apparently not much." And then I brought up Tony Storm, and I said, "What happened with that one?"
Yep.
I, I
No, exactly.
I've written screenplays. I've written graphic novels. I've written books. I don't understand what direction they're going in with that character. I don't understand if she's a crazy woman. I don't understand if she's playing the audience. I don't understand where it can go, where it's going to make logical sense in the end, where you turn on the TV 5 years from now and she's trying to be a regular person again, and the fans are just shaking their heads because, well, then why was she doing that?
Hmm.
How does she ever come back from this? Because she can't keep doing it forever.
And I know that the AEW fans hate when you compare them to WCW, but it does feel like the late 99, 2000, 2001 WCW, where it seems like they're literally booking everything week to week. Like they have no end mapped out. And you brought up the perfect, situation with Tony Storm. It's where is it meant to go? Is there an out? Is there a time where she breaks this timeless Tony Storm character and, comes back to quote unquote the real world?
Well,
There,
it reminds me of this. Do you remember when they put Ric Flair in the nut house?
yes.
To this day, I don't know why they did that with Ric Flair.
Yeah, I don't either. And I don't remember, I don't know why they had him get buried in the desert.
I I don't know why Jungle Boy murdered somebody on TV.
Exactly.
I Then again, you can go back to WWE and there's the same thing because you had them setting people on fire. So
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
there's offenders on both sides, but at this point, AEW, there's no coherent story with a lot of this. And
Hmm.
then, something happens 2 years later, and all the fans point out, well, that was long term storytelling.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's supposed to be. What ticket did that sell? What happened to those years you were supposed to be selling tickets to these wrestling shows with this same story?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to look at current long term storytelling, the entire bloodline up until WrestleMania 40, with Roman Reigns finally losing to Cody, that's long term storytelling.
They were consistently on TV and headlining pay-per-views for how long?
Yeah.
And all of it
Th-
all of it made sense what they were doing.
Yep.
The fans could follow it. That was very easy to follow.
Yes.
Then Roman Reigns got beat at the right time he was supposed to get beat, and the fans got what they wanted.
Yes. And I will tell you, being there live, it it felt like a big fight feel. Like that's the one thing I have to applaud WWE and Triple H for that matter, is that no matter how much people complain, oh, Roman Reigns is a part timer, Brock Lesnar when he comes back, if he comes back, he's a part timer. And that they only have five matches on the PLEs now. The reason being is that they all feel like big fights now. Granted, you're going to have some stinkers in there. The Jimmy Uso versus Jey Uso match sucked at WrestleMania. Um, but the fact is that everything else, even the night before, night one at the end, The Rock and Roman Reigns beating Cody and Seth, the storytelling is fantastic. Now, did they have to swerve in the middle of the story? That's what they say. They said the original plan was The Rock and Roman Reigns. I still say it was a big swerve, and everything that happened was planned how it happened.
Well,
I don't know.
regardless of what happened, WWE is good at having a plan and making it work, whether
Yeah.
they have to change it or not. It worked out in the end. It sold a lot of tickets. It was a massive show. And
Hmm.
that's why the WWE can have these long, like 2 night events and all this stuff going on, and they can sell them out. That's why they can do
Yes.
it, because they appeal to the casual fan.
Yes, you are correct. All right. So you did, we talked about your first book, and you said you're wrapping up your second book. What could we expect coming out on the second book?
The second book is going to be interviews I didn't get to the first time, that
Okay.
either I couldn't fit them in because I had too much and they were too good not to keep out. So
Hmm.
basically, I just started another book because
Oh,
I interviewed for this book. I probably interviewed close to 70, 75 people.
okay.
So I vetted the people before the interviews. I figured out who I wanted, and I narrowed it down to about 70, 75.
Hmm.
That's how many fans you had out there that were articulate, that had great ideas, and had really strong opinions.
Yep.
One thing that gets me, people say wrestling fans aren't intelligent people. That's not true.
Yep. No, you're right. That's not true because there are wrestling fans from all walks of life. Yeah, I mean, even when I was a kid, wrestling fans always used to be closeted, right? It was, it's just, oh, you like that wrestling stuff. That's all fake. And it's like I had the kids in high school that said the same thing, or not in high school, in elementary school, that said the same thing. So, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people that were closeted wrestling fans. But if you look at the videos, from the old timing wrestling, even before, the 70s, when you go back to the 60s, people got dressed up to go out. Like you don't see people in, t-shirt and jeans or, wrestling shirts. You see people in suits and ties.
Well, that's what I'm telling you right now. People that have read my book that aren't
Hmm.
wrestling fans have read it and said these people are very articulate.
Yep.
I never would have thought that.
You're exactly right.
That was one
And
that was one of the biggest surprises. A lot of people that were non-wrestling fans, when they read it, they were like, "Well, this opens my eyes up to wrestling, because if these people are watching it and they find something they like in it, maybe I can."
I completely agree with you. And here's what I'm going to do because this is the first time that I'm going to announce this, but um, as you are going to be a presenter at the Sudsy Awards, I want to actually buy somebody who may not be a wrestling fan, who actually may listen to my podcast more for the soap operas. I want to give away one of your books, What Happened to Our Wrestling? Charlie from Starkville Asks the Fans. I will, what I want to do is anybody who is a soap fan who's listening to this, and I'll put it out there on all of my social medias, uh, in that if you like this, interview, be it on the podcast feed or the YouTube feed, subscribe, and then you send me a screenshot of you subscribing. I will draw a raffle winner, and announce them live on this, or will announce them for the Sudsy Awards, and send them a copy of your book, What Happened to Our Wrestling. Um, and where can anybody who wants to buy the book themselves, where can they find it?
Well, you can buy my comic book, Into the Pines. That's my comic book, Into the Pines by Charlie Dimino. You can buy
Hmm.
that on Amazon, and you can buy What Happened to Our Wrestling on Amazon too. Both of them are on Amazon. Just type in the
Hmm.
titles, type in Charlie Dimino, and they'll pop right up.
Perfect. All right. So I will announce it on the Sudsy Awards. Whoever likes this podcast, either on the podcast feed or on YouTube, and subscribes to either one or the other, emails a screenshot to Vinnie, Vinnie, at sudsandsquirtcircle.com. I will put all those names into a hat and draw one winner at random to receive a copy of your book,
Well,
What Happened to Our Wrestling.
appreciate that, Vinny, and I really appreciate you promoting my book, and I've really enjoyed being here.
No, and I've enjoyed talking to you. We'll definitely do this again, um, because I feel like when you have when you're able to have conversations, no matter what the topic is, whether it's wrestling, whether it's soap operas, whether it's um, about Game of Thrones or anything else in life, as long as you're able to have uh, an, a convenient and a conversation without it, not convenient, coherent. That's the word. But a conversation where it doesn't go down to name calling or you know being offended by something. If you're able to have an intelligent conversation, that's the most important thing. And I feel like you are definitely a very intelligent wrestling fan.
Well, I appreciate that. But you brought up Game of Thrones, and I'm a big Martin fan. And if we do start talking about that, there might be some name calling.
I've never watched an episode, so I wouldn't be able to hold my own.
Well, I'm a big fan of the books, and you know, you've heard some bad things about the actual show, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on. Where could everybody find you on social media?
Starkville Charlie on Facebook. I've got the Starkville Charlie page, which is my personal page. Then
Mm-hmm.
I have the Charlie from Starkville Friends page, which is a group page that I have too. And I've got a third group page that is the official Charlie from Starkville video page, which is a connection to my YouTube page, the official Charlie from Starkville YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a bunch. I've got a really good group of talented guys that work with me to make wrestling music videos. We put up different content on there, and I think if anybody was a fan of mine, they'd enjoy it.
All right, fantastic. So you're not on Twix.
I'm not on Twix, no.
Okay. All right, sounds good. But either way, find Charlie on Facebook, and Charlie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And that's where I'll end it.
Good deal.
All right, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem, Vinny. I enjoyed it, man.
Absolutely, and I'll as soon as I edit this and post it, I'll share a link to the Friends of Charlie from Starkville group, as well as obviously all of my social media, and I will put the put the giveaway together in a post for both Twitter and Facebook as well.
Good deal. I'm hating that I wasn't able to schedule this earlier, but it's been crazy right now.
That's right. Family comes first. I get it.
Dealing with the family stuff. Plus, I gotta go to this con this weekend, so it's gonna be fun. But you know how that stuff goes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But
all right, Charlie.
If you need anything else, let me know. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Talk to you later, man.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye bye.